He sat alone in the dim apartment, the sound of the city muffled by thin walls and thicker doubts. A mattress on the floor, a computer on a shaky desk. A young man who had crossed continents to escape shadows, yet carried them with him in silence. His name was Elon, and on nights like this, he wondered if the world would ever remember it. Born in Pretoria, where dust clung to skin and silence clung to fear, he grew up in a house where affection was scarce and loneliness abundant. The boy who buried himself in books was the same boy who built imaginary worlds inside his head, because the real one had no place for him. School was no refuge. He was beaten, mocked, left half broken on the concrete. The cruelty of children was nothing compared to the indifference of adults. Each day whispered the same truth. No one would save him, so he dreamed of escape. Not a casual dream, but an obsession. North America. The land where ideas mattered more than bloodlines, where ambition could burn through the dark. Canada was the loophole, a way to slip past South Africa's cage of military service and suffocating expectation. He arrived with little more than a suitcase, an accent, and a hunger that bordered on madness. But hunger doesn't feed itself. Nights working odd jobs, shoveling, cleaning, anything to survive. He lived on almost nothing, sometimes choosing between rent and food. At university, he slept in the office, showered at the gym, ate fast food because it was all he could afford. There was no romance in the struggle, only exhaustion and an endless question circling in his head. Was this sacrifice for something or for nothing? What kept him moving was not comfort but torment. A gnawing fear that if he stopped, he would vanish into obscurity, another name swallowed by the crowd. He told himself, build something, anything, even if it fails. Especially if it fails. Better to be destroyed chasing meaning than to live untouched by risk. His first attempt was simple, almost absurd. Zip2, a digital nap directory when the internet itself was still a whisper. He coded until dawn, his eyes burning, fingers trembling from caffeine and fatigue. Investors laughed, critics dismissed him, but he refused to surrender. He slept under his desk, woke to the sound of his own ragged breathing, and kept writing lines of code that no one asked for. The money was non-existent. The office was freezing, the humiliation constant. He pitched to strangers who barely listened, watched competitors mock his ideas, felt betrayal from partners who doubted his vision. Yet through the fog of rejection, a spark caught, a small contract, a flicker of belief from one client. It wasn't glory. It wasn't wealth. But it was survival. Still, survival is a dangerous gift. It convinces you that the next leap might just be possible. And so, when Zip2 sold, when the world handed him his first fragile taste of wealth, Elon didn't rest. He burned the bridge behind him and jumped again. X.com, an online bank when most people still feared typing a credit card number on a screen. He poured everything into it: money, health, sanity. Every critic sharpened their knives. Every headline sneered. But Elon clung to the storm with the stubbornness of a man who had already survived worse. The nights grew darker, the weight heavier. Betrayal came again, this time from inside, board members ousting him from the company he had built. He stared into the abyss of defeat, humiliated, stripped of control, forced to watch from the sidelines as his creation morphed into PayPal. He could have quit then. Many would have. But quitting was the one humiliation he would not accept. So he set his eyes on something bigger, something impossible. Rockets, space, the final escape. Every voice told him it was insanity. Every article framed him as a reckless fool burning through his fortune. Yet he remembered the boy who lay bleeding on schoolyard pavement, the boy who dreamed of Mars when no one even believed in him. That boy deserved more than silence. Tesla came next, equally cursed, equally mocked. An electric car company in a world addicted to oil. Investors doubted, engineers quit, deadlines collapsed. Factories stood half-built, bank accounts ran dry, creditors circled like vultures. Elon stared bankruptcy in the face, not once, but several times, clawing for survival, while critics predicted his downfall with gleeful certainty. The first customer who signed, the first car that rolled out, the first rocket that didn't explode, these were not victories in the grand sense. They were fragile breaths in a drowning sea. Each success only bought him more struggle, more expectation, more nights of terror. He never forgot the silence of those early days, the loneliness of being ridiculed, abandoned, misunderstood. Success did not erase it. It carved it deeper, because every triumph whispered the same haunting truth. It could all vanish again. Elon Musk's story was not built on genius alone, nor luck, nor destiny. It was built on a darkness that chased him since childhood, a fear that survival without meaning was worse than death. His first risks did not make him rich. They made him scarred. His first failures did not end him. They taught him to endure humiliation without breaking. And in the end, the first fragile victories, the contracts, the launches, the cars, were not proof of greatness. They were proof that he was still standing, when by all rights he should have been buried. Because the truth of ambition is not light, but shadow. It is not applause, but silence. Not comfort, but torment. The story of Elon Musk begins not with rockets or cars, but with a man alone in a small apartment, staring into the dark, daring himself to take the first impossible step. But the first step is never the hardest. It is the second, the third, the 1,000th. Each one heavier, each one demanding more blood than the last. By 2008, the world had turned its back on him again. SpaceX had failed 3 launches in a row. Rockets exploded into fragments, dreams torn apart in the void above the Pacific. Every detonation echoed like a cruel reminder. You don't belong here. NASA ignored him. The aerospace industry mocked him. His critics waited for the final collapse. At the same time, Tesla was drowning. Bills piled higher than promises. Cars delayed. Factories suffocating under debt. Elon had invested almost every dollar he had left. The PayPal fortune was gone. He borrowed to survive. He sold possessions. He cut deeper into himself than anyone knew. Behind the scenes, the marriage that once offered him shelter fractured under the strain. Alone again. Always alone. Christmas approached, but there was no warmth. Just 2 dying companies and a man cornered by the very dream he had chosen. He faced a decision that bordered on madness. Save Tesla or save SpaceX. He didn't have enough to keep both alive. Which dream would he bury? Which child would he sacrifice? He refused to choose. He split what little remained, pouring half into each. It was not strategy. It was desperation, defiance, obsession. A bet that seemed designed to kill him. Then came the 4th launch. Falcon 1 lifted into the sky, fire trailing behind it. Minutes stretched into eternity. Elon stood watching, heart pounding like a war drum. And then silence, not of failure, but of awe. The rocket reached orbit. Against every prediction, against every headline of mockery, against the certainty of collapse, it flew. At that moment, history shifted. NASA signed a contract. Investors breathed again. The vultures, for now, pulled back. He had been seconds from ruin. One success turned the tide. A fragile victory, like a candle in the dark, flickering, easily extinguished, but alive. Tesla followed. The first roadsters reached customers. Imperfect, expensive, often ridiculed, but real. Proof that the dream of electric cars was not fantasy. Proof that his madness had shape. Still, it wasn't triumph. It was survival. Survival always came at a cost. He aged a decade in those years. His voice grew sharper, his eyes colder. To live under constant doubt had burned something inside him. He became both admired and hated. To some, a visionary. To others, a fraud. Every step forward invited more knives, more suspicion. But by then, he no longer sought acceptance. He sought inevitability. Rockets would fly, cars would run, whether the world wanted them or not. And yet, the victories did not silence the shadows. They grew with him. He knew that for every success, another abyss waited. Rockets still exploded. Cars still faltered. Factories caught fire. Deadlines slipped. Money bled. Critics never stopped circling, whispering that this time, it would all collapse. Elon learned to live inside the storm, to take humiliation as fuel, to stare into doubt until it blinked. But he never escaped the loneliness. Even at the height of applause, he carried the memory of silence. The boy left bleeding on concrete, the immigrant with no home, the man alone in a small office, eating cold food beside a glowing screen. That silence became his companion, his reminder. Success was fragile. The world would forgive nothing. One mistake, one wrong step, and everything could vanish. And maybe that is why he kept pushing further, faster, always past reason. Mars was not a dream. It was an obsession carved from fear of death, fear of insignificance. Tesla was not just about cars. It was defiance against inevitability, a middle finger raised to the collapse he had lived through too many times. People call him fearless. They are wrong. He is defined by fear of obscurity, fear of irrelevance, fear of becoming the child once forgotten. Fear drove him further than ambition ever could. Fear made him risk everything, lose everything, claw it back, and still gamble again. And perhaps that is the true cost. To live in such darkness is to never rest. Victories bring no peace, only new battles. Failures leave scars that never fade. The world remembers the launches, the cars, the headlines. But Elon remembers the silence. He always will, because the beginning never leaves you. The first failures, the first humiliations, the first nights alone, staring at a ceiling too low for dreams. They haunt every step forward. They whisper in the dark, what if you stop? What if you fall? What if you were never meant to rise at all? The boy in Pretoria, the student in Canada, the coder in the freezing office, the man watching rockets fall into the sea. They are the same person, the same shadow. And so, when people ask where it all began, where Tesla, where SpaceX, where the fortune and fame were born, the answer is not a company, not a rocket, not a car. It is a silence filled with humiliation, loneliness, and the unyielding refusal to surrender. That silence still follows him. It sharpens him. It poisons him. It fuels him. And in the end, maybe it is the only reason he is still standing. Elon Musk's first steps were not victories. They were wounds. Wounds that refused to close. Wounds that forced him to keep moving, to keep proving, to keep burning. And if one day he does fall, if everything collapses again, it will not erase what those wounds created. Because the first step into darkness is never forgotten. It shapes you, scars you, remakes you. And it whispers a question that never leaves. What if you had stopped? What if you had given up? What if the silence had won? And the truth is, then there would be no rockets, no cars, no story. There would be nothing, but he didn't stop. He never stopped. And that is why, love him or hate him, Elon Musk's name is carved into history, not in triumph, but in defiance.